the National Endowment for the Humanities, bringing you the stories that define us.
Thank you for coming, Miss Soledad. Please state your name, your age, when you were born, and where you were born.
All right. My name is Soledad Sambrano, and I was born on May the 3rd, 1936.
Tell me about your childhood. How was it like growing up in San Eli?
I'm still having a little bit of a problem. Okay. It's been a long time, and it was a pleasure to reminisce and think about it. San Eli was a kind of a green town as I remember it. There was a amazing vegetation, and the land was very fertile. So it was, if you took a drive, which we didn't do much driving, but if you took a drive, it was rows and rows of cotton seedlings. And then in some of the fields, they rotated the crops. They grew alfalfa in order to keep the soil fertile. So my recollection is of a very peaceful place, and no junkyards, no colonias, no, yeah. Going back a little bit, when I was born, did you ask me? Yeah, when I was born, but a little story about how when I was born is that I was born right after Sunday Mass. My mother went to church, and she came back, and all of a sudden she started, birth pains, and there was no doctor there. There was no midwife and so it was very fast, and my father ended up cutting my umbilical cord. So I think that's kind of neat to talk about, because we didn't have doctors or dentists. Okay. And San Elizario was not a violent place. We didn't have drugs at that time like there are drugs now. It was, we were never afraid to be out at night or playing outside. So it was very peaceful, very enjoyable. My father died when I was 2 years old. And so he left my mother with 6 children. I have 5 brothers, and I'm the youngest. It was wonderful to have 5 brothers. On the other hand, I didn't have a sister, and it was kind of lonely, I think, because my mother had to get up very early and go to work. And when I wasn't in school, it was just myself with my brothers at home. And since I was not a boy, I was not really included. So I was always by the sidelines. They were very protective of me. So my mother went to work at 7 o'clock in the morning and worked for 12 hours. Didn't come back until 12. She worked really hard. She's very well known in the community. Her name is Josefa Sambrano, and my father was Francisco Sambrano. And so she worked all her life. She was very religious and dedicated her life to God. She was very faithful, very religious, and to the children, raising the children. Very strict, but she had to be strict, I guess.
And what did she do when you say she worked really hard?
She, for many years, she worked in a grocery store there in San Isidro. She was a cashier, and then as all of us worked in that grocery store eventually. One brother was a butcher, Another one was a bookkeeper. They were all teenagers, you know, and one worked in the department where they sold the clothes, mostly underwear, those kind, dry goods, those kinds of things. The other one drove the pickup truck to deliver the groceries, and I helped to put groceries on the shelves. So we all worked there. Basically, we were the only ones that had jobs in the town. Yeah, so that's how we got, that was the income. We pulled the income together, and my brother that was the bookkeeper, he kept a budget for my mother, and we all gave him the money, and he paid for whatever he needed to pay.
Do you remember any stories about how your family came to San Elizario?
Yes, it's an interesting story. I don't know how accurate it is, but anyway, the story was that on my mother's side, the great-grandparents came from Spain to what is now San Antonio. And in the 1800s, no, in the 1700s, they came to San Antonio. That was part of Mexico then. And then they had several covered wagons, and they would transport goods from San Antonio to El Paso and sell them on the way, and then refill the covered wagon with salt. There was a salt mine in San Elizario. And so they filled the wagon with salt. Salt was very valuable. And so then they went back on their journey to San Antonio and sold the salt over there. And they ended up buying land in the El Paso Valley, the lower valley, San Elizario. And that's where they settled eventually. Of course, in the 1800s, during the Mexican-American War, and San Antonio became part of the United States, then automatically became citizens of the United States. But they have been there for a long time.
So that's how your grandparents became part of the United States, and then they've just stayed in San Elizario.
And in our community, San Elizario, everybody spoke Spanish. Most of the people were Hispanic. Maybe 2% might have been other races, but Spanish was the language spoken there. And I didn't learn to speak English until I went to elementary school.
And so what school did you go to? How was it like there? Do you remember any teachers?
I went to San Elizario Elementary School, of course. There was only one school. Now there are a lot of schools, but then there was only one. And we had one Spanish-speaking teacher, Mrs. Paniao. She was the kindergarten, or I guess first grade, the first grade that we went to, and she spoke Spanish. So she helped us with the transition. But we learned English quickly because maybe it was an immersion model. We were not allowed to speak English in school. At home we spoke English, but in the school we spoke, no, in school we spoke English, but at home we spoke Spanish. The community also was very small. And everybody knew each other. The center of the community was the church and the school. Most of the announcements about the school starting or whatever were done at the church. And the first day, this is an interesting story that I tell, is that on the first day of school, we went to school, and just before everything got started, they marched us all to the church, and we went to mass. The whole school went to church. It was just about a block and a half away. I mean, there was no difference between state and the public schools at the time, I guess. Yeah, but everybody was Catholic.
So you saw everybody at school and at church together.
Yeah, we saw them, and I really liked school. I guess I was telling my son the other day that maybe I liked school so much because I was so much alone at home with my brothers. And I loved school. The teachers were all really nice. And I was a very good student. And I spent most of the time studying. It was between studying and activities at the church. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Mr. Alarcon at school?
Mr. Alarcon? Oh, very definitely. Yes. He's, everybody knows Mr. Alarcon. And I'm still very good friends with one of his daughters that lives in California. And we visit. So Mr. Alarcon was very encouraging. And when I was in the 8th grade, it was during the World War II. And there's always a shortage of teachers in San Elizario, but then it was more of a shortage of teachers. And so he had to teach 8th grade. Even though he was the superintendent, he was also teaching 8th grade. And I was in the 8th grade. And he had to go and take care of the office many times. And he also always left me in charge. He had a lot of confidence in me. Yeah. Yeah. So he helped me write the speech, the valedictorian speech when I graduated. And then I memorized it. And yeah, he was a wonderful man. At my wedding, I remember he told my husband, "You could have gone around the world and not found a better wife." I always remember that. Yeah.
So you said that you were also involved in the church. What did you do there?
Well, one of the other things that I learned to do was learn to play the piano. And it was a music director at the church, the lady that played the organ, taught me how to play the piano. And we did not have a piano. We were very poor. So we did not have a piano. But after school, I would stop at her house on my way home. If the door was always open, I would go and practice at her piano. Isn't that amazing? And I learned to play the piano, and then I learned to play the organ, and I played the organ for a while. Yeah. Everybody was very helpful, and everybody liked my mother, so and respected my mother a lot. One of the schools is named after my mother down there, Josefa L. Sambrano Elementary School. So everybody respected her, and everybody was very nice to us, even though we were very poor. And I guess my brothers never got into trouble, so it was okay.
How did she help out in the church?
How did what?
How did your mother help with the church?
Oh, she was in the choir, of course. And then she taught catechism. And then we had these kermeses. And of course, she was always planning for that. We had great kermeses. They still do. And it was great. The way that I finally got a piano was that at one of those kermeses, my brothers and I had a booth. we sold, I don't know what we sold, but we made money and $500, and I bought a piano. I used piano. Yeah.
Okay. So you were involved with the church. You loved going to school. What did you like to do for fun outside of both of those areas? What did you like to do in your free time?
Well, I was good at sports. And in school, I was a very good volleyball player and also baseball player. I was a pitcher. And so on Sundays during the summer, there were games that we went to there in San Eli. Also, the adults had a team. So Sunday was in the afternoon was going to the baseball game, that kind of thing. In the morning, everybody went to church. And then we went to the baseball game. And when I was a teenager, I kind of hung around with my friends, with the girls, and we went to the games together. And we didn't have a theater, no place to go, really. And so we hung together, and the boys, when I was a teenager, then the boys from the other towns used to come, so on Sundays and the weekends. Yeah. Oh, one of the things we loved to do was dance. And there's a dance hall. There was a dance hall there in San Eli that was used for weddings. And every time there was a wedding, people didn't get invitations. Like when I got married, I didn't send out invitations. Everybody was invited, And so we went to the dances. And I had 5 brothers, so I was popular with my friends because I had these good-looking 5 brothers, and we'd go and they had somebody to dance with. So did I. So that's basically what we did for entertainment. Yeah.
You said there was so much vegetation going on. What was your favorite food there?
My favorite what?
Food?
Food. Oh, there wasn't much variety. It was Mexican food, beans and rice, and we did have vegetables, plenty of vegetables, because most people had a small plot of land, and everybody grew vegetables. Not everybody, but most people grew vegetables, and we had a lot of fruit trees, and so pears and apples and quince and peaches. Oh, lots of peaches. And so the adult women canned all these foods. So for the winter, we had plenty of food. We were very poor, but we never were poor. And in terms of meat, we had chickens, we had a cow for milk. My grandmother made asaderos, cheese from the milk. And I had an uncle that was very well off, and so he would slaughter a pig or a calf, and they would put it in a ground pit and cook it all afternoon. And then everybody got a piece, a big chunk of meat, and the neighbors did too. So, and then we had dessert. Of course, we had lots of fruit, but then some of my aunts baked cakes and cookies. It seemed as though most aunts had a job. My grandmother made the chile colorado. Another aunt made the quince jelly. So everybody seemed to have a job, and everybody gave each other food.
Was this for special events or just to help each other out?
Well, no, there were social events. It was a daily activity. That's how we lived. And my, yeah. Oh, on Sundays, we got together. My aunts came from El Paso with their families almost every Sunday. And we would gather together in our backyard because my grandfather's house was left to us. All the other aunts, there were lots of aunts, like 6 aunts and one uncle. They got land and we got the house. And so on Sundays, they would come over and everybody would bring food and we got together. And I remember making ice cream outside, In the morning, my mother would cook the peaches. So we had peach ice cream and we would all, work I don't know what you call it, crank the ice bucket or whatever it was.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
And so did you also live with your grandma or was it just your mother and your siblings?
When I was very small, I had both sets of grandparents. And for some reason, there were a number of old maids. So there were 2 old maids on my father's side, and 1 old maid on my mother's side. And they were very helpful. I suppose that they actually took care of me when I was very small because my mother went to work immediately after my father died. And they were very helpful. I had one of the aunts came on Mondays and did the laundry. And on Tuesday, they did the ironing. So, yeah, very helpful.
And they would come from El Paso to help?
Pardon me?
They would come from El Paso to help you and your mom?
Oh, yeah. My mother was working and they would come over and help at the house.
At the grocery store your mom worked at, was it the only grocery store in San Elizario or just one of them?
There were 2 grocery stores in San Elizario. There were very few commercial things. 2 grocery stores. The one we worked at was a Blanco store and it was a larger one. The other one was the Madrid store and it was smaller, but still. There was that, and all the farmers came from the outside. No, they sent in their lists of the groceries they wanted. And we put them together and my brother then delivered them to them because nobody had transportation. Well, very few people did. So there were those 2 stores and there were 2 bars where the men went. The women didn't go there. And of course there was a school, 1 school, and the church and a post office. In later years, my mother became the postmaster. So she was working at the post office. So she ended up working for civil service. So at the end, she had a pension. And she didn't have well, I think she just had an 8th grade education. Yeah.
So you mentioned you worked at the grocery store growing up. Did you ever work in the cotton fields or your siblings worked there?
When I was very little, my mother, her first job, right after my father died, she wanted to make sure that people understood that she needed a job. So she took all of us with her, and we went and we picked cotton for a while. And then she was given a job with the WPA. That was a coveted job, you know. There were a few jobs, but she got it. That's before she started working at the grocery store, because those jobs dwindled, you know. But when I was maybe 8 and 10, before I started working at the grocery store, I would pick cotton in the afternoons and during the summer. Those of us in my family that were not working yet would pick cotton. That's how I learned my first lessons in economics, I think, because there was no way to spend the money. I mean, what can you buy? Can't buy anything. Maybe a piece of candy. And so I always save my money. To this day, I'm always like that. And so I would save my money. And then in the winter, my brothers, when they ran out of money, they would borrow money from me. And I didn't know about interest or anything, but they would pay me back more than I loaned them. So I was a little bank for my brothers.
How was it like picking the cotton? Do you remember?
Pardon?
How was it like picking the cotton? Do you remember?
What's the name?
How was it like picking the cotton? Do you remember?
Oh, yes. And we picked the cotton on the land. We had a small plot of land, maybe 5 acres, that we leased to our neighbor. And so that's where we picked the cotton. I picked the cotton. My brothers would go out, but I picked the cotton there. And it was hard to pick the cotton because, you know, when you pick the cotton, it's very prickly. And so your fingers get swollen and rough and sometimes bloody. So it was a little hard to pick the cotton. Yeah.
You also mentioned that not a lot of people had cars. How did you get around in San Eli?
We never had a car until my brothers came back from the military. They were all drafted during the Vietnam and Korean War. When they came back, then they bought cars. But there was a bus system that went from Clint, Texas, all the way to El Paso. And I don't know, it went through maybe every couple of hours. So, but we seldom had occasion to go to El Paso. And so, but when we did, we took the bus. It took about an hour to get to El Paso on the bus, and then it would come back. But no, there was no way to get around. We walked everywhere, to school, to church, to the job. So with our friends, we walked a lot. Yeah.
And so then what high school did you go to? Did you take the bus there?
Yes, I was bused to school. I went to Isleta High School. That was the main school. There was a school in Clint, but the bus went to Isleta. And Isleta was not a place where I developed leadership skills in the school. I developed my leadership skills in San Eli, in the church, you know, but going to school in Isleta, the Hispanics were kind of not included, or maybe we excluded ourselves. I don't know. We stayed together with each other. The only thing that I belonged to was the National Honor Society. Yeah. while at home, I was the leader in the different things. In high school, I didn't do that. And we had to come home on the bus. The boys couldn't play sports either because there was no way of coming home other than on the bus. And if you missed the bus, how would you get home? So they didn't play sports. And that's when one of my brothers went to high school in Clint because he wanted to play sports. And he went to Clint. He was the only one that went to Clint.
You mentioned you were in 8th grade during World War II. How was San Elizario at that time during World War II?
During World War II, I graduated in 1945 from San Elizario. And from San Elizario, yeah. And no, in 45, yeah, 45. I'm getting a little mixed up here. What was the question? I'm sorry.
How was the community of San Elizario during World War II? Do you remember?
No, we didn't have a newspaper. We didn't have a library in our school. It's amazing that we, some people were successful and learned English and whatever. There was no newspaper, there was no library. And so we did not talk very much about the war. We didn't know very much what was happening, except that we knew of the men that were being drafted. And then when they came home or they died, my cousin died. So there wasn't much communication. Yeah.
You mentioned your brother went to war, and then when they came back,
Others were drafted right after high school, one right after the other. And in a sense, that was very good for them because they got out of the town, saw a different world. They all served in Germany, and one was in the Navy, Korea, Vietnam. But what happened was that when they came back, they had the GI Bill. So my first brother that came back went to Texas Western College at the time. No, it was College of Mines at the time. And he studied engineering and electrical engineering. And so, and then as each one came back, they got the GI Bill and went to school. And they also worked part-time and lived at home. But they went to college because they had the GI Bill. And it did very well, all of them. The only one that didn't get the GI Bill was me. So when I graduated from high school, I went to work and started going to night school because one of my brothers was going to night school, so I had to ride home. And then after that, I started going during the day, still working full time, going during the day. It took me 5 years. Yeah, I paid for everything. Yeah, myself.
when did you learn how to drive? Did you learn how to drive in San Eli?
Yes, my brother had this big truck. They used to haul, I don't know what they hauled. So I learned to drive on that big truck back and forth in the driveway. Yeah, when I was 16. So I learned to drive right away. We didn't have cars.
By yourself, or did your brothers teach you?
Well, initially, back and forth by myself. And then later on, when we had a car, it was my youngest brother that went out with me, taught me to drive.
So who else were some memorable people in San Eli that just comes to mind in the community?
San Elizario? Well, basically, I just thought of Mr. Alarcon. The teachers were nice, and actually two young teachers, it was their first year of teaching, and they came to teach in San Elizario, and I was in the 6th grade, and they gave me clothes. It was the first time I had wool clothes. It was all cotton. I made my own dresses when I was growing up. Yeah. And you know what I made them out of? I made them out of sacks, flour sacks. We used to buy 100-pound flour sacks. Flour, yeah, flours, 100 pounds of flour. And if I chose two of the same pattern, they had patterns, two of the same pattern, I could make a dress. Yeah.
And who taught you, or how did you learn?
I taught myself a lot of stuff. Yeah, because my mother was working. I don't know. Yeah.
And what are some other great memories you have growing up in San Elizario?
Well, I think of the peacefulness of San Elizario, although I'm a little disappointed when I go down there now, and it's not the same. It used to be beautiful. At least that's what I remember. It used to be beautiful, but what other things?
How was the community? Do you remember how the community? Yeah.
Well, the community was very supportive. And one of the things that I enjoyed doing was in the summers, we put on plays when I was a teenager and then in high school, in Spanish. And the day of the play, the day before the play, we would go on this truck with bullhorns and let everybody know the play is tonight, come and join us. And everybody would go to the play, in Spanish.
Where were the plays?
It was there in the hall of the church hall. Yeah. I went to teach 1 year in San Eli.
I'm sorry?
I went to teach 1 year. Let me go back a little. When I was in the University of Texas, first it was the Texas Western College. That's where I met my husband. And we got married in 1959. And so I lived in San Elizario until I graduated from college and got married. Got married in the summer after I graduated. And then my husband and I went off. He went to graduate school, and we lived in a number of different states and out of the country. I have 3 children. I don't know if you met my daughter. No, she hasn't been down there. I have a daughter, Margaret, that has worked with the community, with the genealogy. Margaret Arenas, and my middle son, John, who lives here. And this is why I came here. and another son that lives in Florida. So I'm grateful for Sanelli because I learned my values, my faith values in Sanelli, and that was basically my mother. She was very religious. And, you know, even the school was very poor. I still got the basics to the point where we all went to college, and then after my marriage ended in divorce in 1973. This is not about Sanelli, but in 73, I went to graduate school at Harvard. Yeah, with 3 children. And then I got a job in Washington. So I worked for the federal government for 31 years. And I was a senior executive for the federal government, head of research for substance abuse prevention, the national director. And so I tell you this because, I also got a PhD, yeah, in child development. And that was while I was raising my children. So these values that I got in San Inisario taught me to be self-sufficient, to have a strong faith, which I always have, to be resilient, resourceful. I remember at Harvard, the first class that I had, one of the professors said, "It's not how smart you are, but how resourceful you are." And I have done that. I have been very resourceful. So the background that I had certainly helped me survive all that I went through, you know, and raise my children by myself and give them a very good education. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so what's the word? Inspiring, because an example was the dresses you made. That was being resourceful. And
Resourceful, yes, and having very little at the beginning and working very hard. We all worked very hard since picking cotton, you know, and when we're just kids, and throughout the years worked at the grocery store, and then while I was in college, worked in college, and helped to put my husband through graduate school. And yeah.
so during college, would you commute from San Eli, or were you living in El Paso?
No. I lived at home. We all lived at home until we got married. Everybody did. Yeah. It's like now with my grandchildren, it belonged to, like my granddaughter belongs to sororities and all that. We didn't have that. We worked, but that was good, you know?
Okay. I remembered other women talked about the posadas. Do you have any memories of the posadas?
Oh, very good memories of the posadas because I was in the choir. So we were the group that was singing, right? And we really looked forward to the posadas every year, and then going from house to house. And at the final house, we got chocolate, and it was lovely. It was, yeah. The community was so involved. It was a true community, which, you know, don't necessarily have areas like here. I live in New York now. And I moved to New York because one of my sons lives here. And I told my children that when I retired, I would move close to one of them. And I guess this one says he won one out. So I moved here. Yeah.
Yeah, because New York is very everyone to their own, and Sanelli was very community based.
Well, everyone's on their own. On the other hand, I live in the community in New York Larchmont, which is like 30 minutes from the city on the train. And I came here and I was surprised at how welcoming the community was. I got involved doing volunteer work right away. And I even became the president of the women's club in Larchmont. And so, yeah, very welcoming, and I'm still very much involved in the community. Mhm.
Is there anything else you want to say about growing up that maybe I have missed?
Oh, I don't know.
How was the weather? Did it ever snow?
In Sanelli? No, no, seldom had snow, and we didn't have winter clothes either. You know, we. I remember one time that my brother took me to El Paso because my mother was working. We got on the bus and we went to El Paso. I must have been like 10 to buy me a coat. I mean, it's not like now we have closets full of coats, Yeah. And I remember also that because it's winter and I'm remembering that, we had basically one pair of shoes and then like Sunday shoes, but I don't know. But I remember having a hole in my shoes and putting in cardboard, until we were able to take it to the shoe repairman, So we were very poor.
But that was you being resourceful.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And also believing in yourself, it gained confidence. I gained a lot of confidence in San Elizario because I was right there in the middle of the community, arranging things at the church and at the school. And that year that I spent in San Elizario teaching was a wonderful year. It was wonderful because I knew the parents, and they didn't have parent-teacher associations there, But I got all my parents involved, and I had gone to school with some of them, with the parents. So they were very helpful to me, and I was even the coach for the girls coach, and we won the district that year while I was there.
What year was that when you taught?
What year?
Mhm.
My daughter I only had my daughter. It was in 62, like in 62. We were there in El Paso one year, and so my brother was teaching in San Elizario. One of my brothers was the principal, and he said, "You need to come and teach over here." And so I did, and it was great. On the weekends, I used to take 4 children to the library in El Paso. They used my library card, and then they wrote book reports. So every Saturday I took different children to the library,
And what grade did you teach?
What age?
Yeah, what grade?
Well, it was 5th grade. They were lovely. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what did you coach again?
Pardon me?
What did you coach again?
I'm sorry.
You coached the sport, you said?
I,
You were a coach to a sport?
oh,
Yeah.
no. Oh, no. I didn't even have a degree in education, but I was very, very good at sports. I was very good at sports. I love sports. That's another thing that builds character and fellowship with your teammates and all that. And so that's where when I after school, I would coach the girls. Mhm.
And when you played sports in elementary, did you play with other schools or
Yes,
yeah?
yes, yes. In fact, we used to go to different schools, and Mr. Alarcon once time said, Soledad, you can do everything except drive the bus. Would you go get a driver's license for driving the bus? I said, no. So I could take the girls everywhere.
Do you remember the kiosco on Sundays?
The schools on Sundays, do I remember what?
The kiosco?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, that was the main center for the activities, and we had the musicians there, and oh, the politicians, never mind, they came over, and that's where they gave their speeches. I have never really been much into politics. Uh, Basically, I guess because working for the government, you can't be involved. But that's where we heard all the politicians in Sanelli at the kiosco. And my mother was involved. Yeah, but she never let us know who she voted for.
Okay, Miss Soledad, I don't have any more questions for you, but if you have anything else to say, I'm happy to hear.
think, I mean, what are you going to do with this?
So it's gonna go to the San Eli Museum, the Portales Museum, and I'm just collecting a lot of interviews, and they're hoping to put them on a website accessible to people. Also, just for them to have in the community, and if community members ever want to know about life in San Elizario, they can always refer to your videos.
I think it's a good idea to look to the past and see how the past has actually influenced us, because it certainly has influenced me. And I still regard San Elizario as my hometown. Even though I've lived in many different places, and living here, I still go down there once in a while. And in my will, I have asked that I be buried there. I could be buried in a very nice place. No, but I want to be buried there by my mother. My father's in the cemetery, and my brother is right there. So I'm going to have my plaque put right there in Sanelli. I'm going back to my roots.
What
I appreciate
what happened to your house there? Is it still there?
San
Or
Elizario. Yes, yes, it was sold, and a young couple that moved in years ago remodeled it. And one of the things that we didn't talk about was in terms of the difficult times growing up without electricity. And I think that came soon, but we didn't have running water. We had an outhouse. We had a pump. We used to pump water to take a bath on Saturdays. We always took a bath on Saturdays, just on Saturdays. We took a bath on Saturdays and pumped the water and heated the water on the stove, and then brought in a big tub, the tubs that we use for washing, tin tubs, really big, and brought them in. And in the kitchen, we'd put the tub, and that's where we took a bath. But the next thing we had to do was go to confession. We always went to confession on Saturday afternoon. Yeah. Very religious, my mother. Yeah. Yeah. But, it was hard times, and we were very poor, but everybody was poor. Everybody was poor. There were a few families that had money, but those were very few. And but they didn't have any more than we had, I don't think. Yeah. No, I mean they had the lands, but they didn't have a lot of extra money, I don't think. Yeah.
And people lived off their land, the food that they farmed, they ate out of it.
Yeah. The land really makes a difference. You know, land is a good investment. And so even then it was a good investment. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this, Miss Sambrano. I'm gonna stop recording